Okay, so welcome to week 2, day 2 of Psych 105. The question that we got was, do we need to have an abstract for the weekly assignments? The answer is no. I don't require an abstract for that. The only time I think I'm going to ask for an abstract is for the group final project. So just make sure you're following the APA guidelines for that. And again, I think I had mentioned this a couple times before. If you want to include a title page in your weekly assignment, you're more than welcome to do that. But again, not required. I'll give you feedback on that if you want it. But I'm not going to mark you down if you don't have a title page. The one thing I will ask that you have, especially for the written assignments, is to have a reference page at the end. So that's not necessarily included as a page. So if I say 1 to 2 pages, your one page just can't be your reference page. Okay, so at least have 1 page of text, no more than 2. If I give you a range, try not to exceed that range, because I think that would be a little unnecessary. But if you feel you have to do that, that's up to you. But at the end, making sure you have a separate page as a reference page, and you can see those guidelines also in D2L under class content or course content. Okay. All right, so let's begin. As Kirsten mentioned, talking about nature versus nurture, right? Now, many of you have probably done the reading already. So what do we mean by nature versus nurture? I'm going to share my screen with you so you can see what I'm writing. Well, what does the argument nature versus nurture tell you? Anybody brave?
The argument nature versus nurture is trying to explain how important the environment is, the environment we're living in is going to affect us, and how important our genetics and how we're raised is going to affect us.
Okay, yeah. So nurture would be which one of those?
That would be genetics and how you're raised.
Okay, so environment, right?
Yeah.
And I'll get a little bit more as to, because environment, that's kind of a broad term, but we'll break that down here shortly. Nature, on the other hand, is what was the word you said? I think it was Kwamir that said that, right? What was the word you used for nature?
Genetics.
One more time.
No, wait.
Genetics.
Yeah.
Genes. Yep. Heredity. Absolutely. So genetic background versus environmental background. Now, up until about the 60s, we really explained, in the psychology field, we really explained behaviors and thoughts and emotions, and even behaviors, I already said. We explain those in terms of environment. We always, up until that point, we really thought that those 3 areas, so behaviors, thoughts, and emotions / personality. We always considered those back then to be environmental. We thought that we were a product of our environment. So if we displayed rage as a response to experiencing anger, that must have been learned, right? That's what we thought up until about 1960s, when we were seeing that there were similar traits within families that had geographic separations and had different environments, right? We also saw that within family systems, same parenting style, and same culture, same environment, we were seeing different behaviors within siblings. So that couldn't explain it, right? So that got psychologists to start thinking, well, wait a minute, there must be something more here. And we started looking at possibly this is a genetic that could be and your book does a really thorough job of explaining what recessed genes are and dominant genes. I'm not going to go too much into that today because that is like a wormhole I don't want to go down today. It is very extensive, but we started realizing that recessive genes and predominant genes, dominant genes, could be reflecting in these three areas as well, right? So right around the 70s, a lot of scientists and psychologists and geneticists started doing a little bit more digging into this. And they came up with what was the Minnesota Twins study, which they started tracking twins after birth that were separated into the world. So, for example, one set of twins, they were up for adoption. The parents couldn't care for one or both of them, and they were given up for adoption, and both went to different parts of the country or different parts of the world. So the geneticists and the psychologists wanted to track and see where were there similarities and where were there differences. What could we explain with genetics and what could we explain or discount with environment? So I'm going to play this short video for you that kind of talks about the Minnesota Twins study a little bit. Oh, actually, sorry. Let me go back and do that again. Can you all see the video?
Yeah.
All right.
Maria Teresa were the Maria twins.
And today, the Maria twins are joining thousands of others.
Is the volume good for everybody?
Yes.
All right.
For the 21st Annual Twin Festival here in Twinsburg, Ohio. It's early in the morning, and many twins, such as those too young to walk, as well as these 82-year-old World War II veterans, are getting settled, waiting for one of the weekend's special features. The Twins Parade. Most of the twins dress alike, some in typical garb, while others have twin themes, twin songs, twin messages, and, well, you get the picture. And twins come to Twinsburg from all over the country.
We're from Owensboro, Kentucky.
Indiana.
The parade goes on for about half an hour, and of course there's a float with a parade queen, or two. And at this three-day festival, you can even find twins who are dating other twins. So what's it like being a twin?
Oh my God, we love it. We are always together.
Inseparable.
Yeah. We know each other's thoughts. We're always on, without saying.
This is like the best friend on the God's green earth.
Just feels like having a regular sister. We have the same friends.
Do they always talk like that?
It's pretty amazing sometimes that they both say the same answer, like a multi-word answer, and it's in the same cadence, and it's the same exact words.
I live on one end of the farm, he lives on the other end of the farm. We're retired union carpenters.
We pay medical claims at an insurance company.
But that doesn't mean there aren't differences.
We like different men. Yeah. Different type men.
What do you like?
Tomato soup.
What do you like?
Dogs.
Her hair is short, mine's long. I mean, we like some same stuff, but a lot of stuff we just don't like the same stuff. She likes hip hop, I like kind of rocky music, so it's kind of, we look the same, but we're not really.
I don't like tomato soup.
He's a half pound bigger than I was when he was born, and he's still a half pound bigger.
There's also a strong research component at the festival. There are a variety of studies collecting data from the twins as well as their family members. This University of Pittsburgh study is trying to better understand risk factors for substance abuse seen later in life.
This question is how well your parent listens to you. The twin data help us to narrow down the sort of genetic and environmental influences on what we know to predict substance abuse later on.
But far away from the festival, here in Minnesota, psychologist Thomas Bouchard Jr. is director of the Minnesota Center for Twin and Adoption Research. Bouchard's interest in twins goes back to the 1960s.
When in fact, psychologists believed all psychological traits were primarily determined by parenting and experiences during youth.
Early on, Bouchard made certain assumptions.
I thought there's some traits, probably all environmental, and then other things like impulsiveness that were kind of biological. And I said, we're going to separate what's biological and what's environmental.
The research looked at identical or monozygotic twins who share the same DNA and fraternal or dizygotic twins who share half their DNA. The results with identical twins shocked him.
One twin pair after another turned out to be similar across everything we looked at. Now, not identical, similar. There's a genetic influence of about 50%. But I plotted the personality profiles of one of my early sets of twins, and they were like the same person took the test twice.
And it didn't matter if the identical twins were reared apart or together.
Because our monozygotic twins reared apart show just as much similarity as twins raised together.
And if the twins were treated differently by their parents, that did not make them less similar.
No, doesn't matter. And fortunately, people have now replicated that. Other twin studies find the same. There's nothing odd about our findings.
All twins provide psychologists with an unusual research opportunity.
People don't realize that twins are an experiment.
They are an experiment of nature. And years ago, if twins were orphaned, it was not unusual to have the twins reared separately. This created another research opportunity.
Adoption is an experiment. So when we study monozygotic twins reared apart, dizygotic twins reared apart, monozygotic twins reared together, dizygotic twins reared together, we have a cross between an experiment of nature and an experiment of society. And we can actually talk about causal influences, just as any experimenter does.
By studying large numbers of twins, researchers have estimated the influence of genes and the environment upon a wide range of behaviors and traits, and they have extended findings with twins to the rest of us by comparing similarities in twins to those seen between ordinary siblings and between parents and children. One of the most controversial extensions involves the influence of parenting. We've long believed that parenting has a major influence on the way children behave. But does it?
The answer is not much. And that's a real surprise. This should have been suspected long ago when people realized how different any two children in a family are. If it's the family rearing style that causes children to have particular characteristics, there should be a lot more similarity between the siblings than there are.
Bouchard emphasizes that these conclusions apply to children reared in typical homes.
It should be very, very clear that a child who was beaten and abused and mistreated will be different from the same child who was reared in an ordinary environment and properly cared for.
The more Bouchard studied twins, the more surprises he found.
I thought it would be ludicrous to find genetic influence on social attitudes, authoritarianism, conservatism, even religiousness. It never crossed my mind that these things would be genetically influenced. We acquire our political attitudes and our social attitudes, and they change over time. But as a function of our choosing to expose ourselves to certain kinds of ideas and certain kinds of things. So I think the genetic influence has to assert itself in terms of making us pay attention to this rather than that.
But even if most social attitudes are somewhat genetically influenced, it doesn't mean that genes are your destiny.
We'd have been bigots if it wasn't for our wives. My dad was a bigot. He belonged to KKK. We had every right to be a bigot, but we're not.
The point here is that when we say these things are genetic, we're talking about a propensity. We're not saying these are fundamentally unchangeable.
And twin research doesn't presume genetic explanations.
Our job is to find out how things work, and that's basically what twin research does. It doesn't presume it's genetic. A twin design can reveal an entirely environmental event if the cause is environmental. What you need is a a research design that will answer the question, not presume an answer.
Just how important is the environment as an influence? Recall that even identical twins are only 50% similar across traits.
You don't believe in abortions? I do. I don't.
Certain environmental factors, experiences that these twins did not share, called unique or non-shared experiences, must explain these differences. But just what constitutes important non-shared experiences remains a mystery.
We don't have a vaguest idea what they are. It's really amazing. So we have a handle. Genes seem to be exerting an influence somewhere around 50%. Unique environmental influences seem to be doing the other 50%. Now, interestingly enough, from the point of view of a scientist, we don't know how the genes do this. That's a mystery. And we don't know how the environment does it. That's a mystery.
And there are other mysteries.
I think if somebody can explain how the brains of monozygotic twins reared apart get wired to have similar political attitudes, they'll get a Nobel Prize. One of the real surprises to me has been that we haven't found specific genes for specific psychopathologies. 15, 20 years ago, I'd have bet by now we'd have had those genes.
But what isn't a surprise is that twins can help us to better understand many aspects of human behavior.
I discovered things that contradicted what I believed, what I had been taught. And I think that's what makes science interesting to scientists. They find new things, beliefs they have get overturned, so it's been a really exciting adventure along those lines.
All right, really cool stuff, huh? I like that video because a lot of what, and it really grounds me in my practice when I'm helping people or assisting children with their behaviors, because we tend to default to think that maybe it's something the parents need to do or the caregivers or the teachers need to do. And in some cases, that's maybe just not it. It might be something a little bit more ingrained and genetic with that child or that individual. So that's why we go back and forth, and this is why nature versus nurture is such a hot debate. And even after this study, we've really kind of dichotomized nature versus nurture, right? We're not looking at them and one and the same. And that's epigenetics, which your book talks about, and hopefully we'll have a little bit of time to explain here later today. But so with nature versus nurture, he talked about things like what sort of things that we thought were environmental are now really explained in genetics. What were some, does anybody remember some of those things, those traits?
Political opinions.
Political opinions, yeah. Now, and I did have a little bit of, that was interesting because some of their political opinions were spot on with each other and some of them were aligned. And I think they mentioned 50-50 as like 50%. and in our country, in our governmental system, we really have, it's a bipartisan system, right? We have Republican or conservative views and we have liberal or Democratic views. So that wasn't super compelling. He did mention that though. Yeah. But what are some other things that might be a little bit more obscure if we were trying to explain an environmental?
Was that like taste in music?
Okay. Taste of music a little bit more, because we have probably a couple dozen of music genres out there, and taste of music would definitely probably be more of a phenomenon, right?
Some could be that some of them don't act the same as the other. Okay,
so certain behaviors, personality. Remember what they were talking about with doing the personality test, administering both of them? And he said what? It was like two people had taken the exact same, had answered the exact same way, right? So personality even shows, and that's even harder to replicate. So if I gave everybody in this class a personality test, I would probably have, what do we have logged in here today? We have 44 people logged in today. I would get most likely at least 42 different tests. Maybe some of you are closely aligned, but that's a very hard thing to replicate. So the fact that they were able to be reared apart, be separated in different environments, and then given the same test and answer very similarly on those personalities, that's really remarkable. I mean, that's like a 1 in a billion chance that could happen. Okay, so some really cool stuff when it comes to nature versus nurture. When we talk about the environment that we're raised in, what do we mean by that? What are some markers of the environment that we're raised in? Think about your environment. What formed you in your environment?
Family values, or are we talking about like just the world environment, like the environment I live in with my family, or life?
Okay, good question. Have both of those formed you into the person you are today?
I would say so.
Okay. So we can look at things at a small scale, right? And we kind of go global a little bit. You said the world, right? I believe, right? So to that end, we have what we call our microsystem. All right, and by the way, if you're following along in your book, this is the ecological systems theory that I'm going off of. And this is one of the most prominent theories in psychology when we talk about people's environments and how they're raised in those environments. So you have your microsystem. Okay, next is your mesosystem. Actually, I think I have a graphic on here for this. Yeah, I do. Good. Okay. Okay, yep. So your microsystem really describes where you are, and they got a picture of a baby in the middle here, okay? So your microsystem is your immediate environment. It could be, at a young age, it could be your playpen. It could be the things that you have surrounding you with toys or activities that are stimulating your mind. These are what form us at a microsystem level. Now, our microsystem level is very, very much ingrained. In fact, it forms probably like one of the most primary, and I don't think we go too much into personality, but what we call a primary personality trait. It's something that's very hard to break. So if this child is maybe imprinting didn't occur and attachment, the child becomes very insecure, that usually happens at the microsystem level. And that carries into other systems such as the mesosystem and the exosystem, okay? And then by nature, probably into even cultural contexts or the chronosystem or macrosystems. So anyway, at the very minute level, we have the individual microsystem. Outside of that, we have our mesosystem, right? So our mesosystem is more when we grow a little bit older and we start interacting. We interact with our parents, with our aunts and uncles, with grandparents, and we really develop what, and I forgot, I didn't catch her name, I'm sorry, family values, right? This is where we start developing our family values. And then beyond that, after we get used to our family, we start branching out into socialization. Now, socialization is very important because now you're not only taking your family values, you're carrying your family values and comparing them with your peers, with other families, with other systems, right? After your childhood peer values, you start branching out even more and looking at your neighborhood, with your parents not around perhaps, okay? So you're constantly, you see on this graph, it has two-way, bidirectional. It's because all of these feed into each other together, You're constantly comparing and contrasting all these systems and then taking them back to your family. And if you remember, or if you have any kids yourselves or younger siblings, you probably remember that children are pretty much attached at the family system until they meet, I'm just going to throw a name out there, Scotty. I don't know if there's a Scotty in this class or not, but if you are, no harm intended here. But you meet Scotty was my childhood friend, so I'm kind of picking on him. So anyway, you meet Scotty and you hang out with Scotty and you find out that, Scotty's parents don't make him eat vegetables for dinner, right? What happens to children that find out that these golden nuggets of information and bring it back to their family? What do you think happens at dinner when mom tries to tell the child to eat their vegetables? What happens?
Scotty doesn't eat his vegetables.
Scotty, right, exactly. Scotty doesn't eat his vegetable. Why should I do that? So now you see this bi-directional. They're learning what boundaries they can get away with in their family environment. Okay, pretty cool, right? And depending on the parent's level of expertise, they can either figure out ways to negotiate that with Scotty, or I'm sorry, well, I guess I'll use me as an example. So that way they can reinforce more family values that way. So it all really works in concert with each other, right? So going out further to the exosystem. Now we've entered into school. We're school age. Usually, many of us, it might be preschool or kindergarten or even first grade, right? We start expanding our mesosystem and we start figuring out how the world actually works. So this happens a little bit later in childhood and more into adulthood as we step out of our neighborhoods a little bit, right? Maybe we're driving now and we can visit friends across the state or across the city. Many of us in adolescence start getting jobs. So we're applying what we learned in the mesosystem and negotiating that in our workplace and in our community and in our school, right? And even extended family in some cases, like maybe aunts and uncles you haven't seen in 10 years or so. Then at a macro system, we also learn values, right? And this happens, and I don't really agree with this because it really shows like defined lines, and there really aren't defined lines. This is one of those continuous things I was talking about, because not only do we get to apply these when we get older to cultural customs and worldly values and local and state and national laws, but what effect do these things have on our family and microsystems? What would you say? Is this a two-way? Go ahead.
For some people, it's kind of like family values. So you kind of learn that rather than experiencing it for yourself. So from childhood, you might have the values or follow the laws or customs that your parents have, but as you grow older, you begin to see the world through your own eyes or experience your own things. So customs, values, and laws that you follow or believe in can change.
Right. Okay. So these values influence our mesosystem pretty heavily, don't they? With customs and traditions, right? Maybe you have an ethnicity, traditions within your ethnicity. Now, for me, I'm Irish, and every St. Patrick's Day, we make a big deal. I think most people do make a big deal of pork and sauerkraut. I'm sorry, not pork and sauerkraut. Corned beef, cabbage, and sauerkraut, and green beer. And my family does a whole event. Some people just go to restaurants or go to bars and have green beer or something like that. That's how they celebrate those Irish traditions. For me, we have it's a whole day event where we get all of our family together and really celebrate our Irish heritage. But that's ingrained in us. That's what we do. We've been doing it for many generations. We continue to do that. Values may influence how we view view ourselves in certain, I'm trying to think of certain spheres or expectations. For example, what until recently has been gender role expectations. What do I mean by that? So what is the expectation? Like, what is the schema that we associate with males in America?
The male is like he's the one bringing in the money and taking care of the family, like supporting them financially and everything like that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the worker bee role, kind of the worker, right? And what about women? What is women? What have their traditional roles been?
They're supposed to take care of the child and like do all like the chores inside the home.
Okay. And what about play and interactivity with like a dad interacting with a daughter, a baby daughter? What would his reaction be differently to? And again, just looking at the sphere of gender roles and expectations, would there be a difference in play between a dad and his daughter and a dad and his son?
Yes.
Maybe like I was just gonna say maybe like tough love in some aspects. Maybe like when he playing with his son and stuff like that. You know what I mean? Like if his son scraped his knee or hurt himself, he might tell him like, you know, it's okay, just get back up, keep going. As opposed to his daughter, who he gonna treat like maybe like a princess. You know what I mean? Not let no harm come to her. Always make sure that, you know, she's safe at all times, etc.
Right. And that has been brought down from our societal values. And you see how that works. This all really lumps into one, I'm not going to say well-oiled machine, but one big wheel. Okay. And I think that's why I like that diagram the best. It just shows everything is interconnected. I don't like the different layers because they all interact with each other. But that could be a big issue, especially, and that's one that we're fighting today with our societal changes, right? Is breaking outside of these gender role issues. We came up with an example, I believe we did it in this class, of women earning less on average salary per year in the United States, right? That's a real issue because those gender expectations have not necessarily caught up yet. We're getting there, we're getting closer, but we're not there yet. And until we see people as equals, you know, that's going to continue to be a struggle for us as a society, right? All right. So with, go ahead.
So I was wondering with like the systems. So when a baby is like born in the hospital, they have like the skin to skin contact. Would that play into like the micro system?
Skin to skin contact. You mean like nurturing? Attachment, imprinting?
Yeah, I guess that's like my question. Like what would be considered? Because I know they have like at the hospital, they have the mother and the father do skin to skin contact with the baby.
Mm-hmm. What you're talking about is attachment theory, and we will be covering this in great length as well. But attachment theory is the idea that we form certain levels of attachment with a caregiver, usually the mother earlier on, you know, usually right after birth, and a lot of pediatricians and doctors and psychologists would agree that having that skin to skin contact does help reduce anxiety. And there's a lot of research that supports that. Okay. But you're asking, is that at a microsystem level?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Because if we have a like a society, and again, this is where values and customs really, because you're closest to your parents when you're born. So if we have a society that really promotes independent behaviors, right? There may not be as much nurturing. There may not be as much of that skin to skin contact. But we in America, we really value independence, but we also value nurturing and child rearing. Okay, so there's kind of this weird little. Now in Germany is a little bit different. Germany is a very independent. They really promote independence with their children, and I'm not bashing them in any way. They have a system that works for them, but for within Germany, there is less of that. There's less nurturing and a little bit more sternness that we talked about, and that comes from just what their culture presents itself, right? And we'll get into collectivism versus individualism. I think we cover that next week as well. But depending on what your society dictates or your society promotes, either collectivism or individualism, that's going to reflect on how you how this microsystem plays out. Okay. Any other questions on ecological systems theory before we move on? All right. So sticking with, so that's the environmental that we talked about. Going back to genetics, up until recently, we really considered that it's one or the other. It's either genetics that is promoting certain behaviors or traits, or it's environmental. It's one or the other. It's not really both, right? If we come out genetically predisposed to depression, our environment isn't going to really do a whole lot for that. And we hear that with alcoholism, right? As an example, alcoholism, we've heard is genetic, right? We're now learning that it may not just be alcoholism that's genetic. It may be actually depression, because we can account for lower levels of serotonin or predisposition to misfiring of dopamine to be hereditary. So when that happens, what do you think? If somebody is more prone to anxiety or depression, what role would addiction or substance abuse play on that? Would that be environmental or genetic, do you think?
Both.
What's that?
Both.
Could be both. Okay. All right. This kind of goes into epigenetics, which describes that we, yes, have a genetic predisposition to something, right? Parents have, let's say, depression. Their method of coping with depression is substance. Okay, so depression, we can account for genetics and say that, yes, there might be a marker within our DNA that predisposes us to depression. So good chance that child is going to be past depression, okay? Child's environment. How did the parents cope with depression or anxiety?
Substance abuse.
Substance abuse. Okay, exactly. So you see where I'm going with this. So substance abuse. Now the child has depression with substance abuse as well. Okay. And where epigenetics plays a role here is perhaps that child was not, that depression gene was not necessarily activated until maybe bad parenting, maybe something happened in his or her environment that led to that gene being activated. And now that they have depression, it is full blown. Those genes are replicating. Growth hormones are going down, which we'll talk about, especially if they're enduring prolonged source of trauma. So growth hormones go down, which again affect the genes. Do you see how all that works? So that's basically, in a nutshell, the interaction between our environment and our genes and how they affect each other. Okay, does that make sense? Did I lose anybody with that? Okay, what I would like to do is go back to my slide here. I want to break you off into groups for just a few moments here, and I want you to consider, in fact, if you could, write it down or type it up or whatever you have to, where did okay. Microsystem, mesosystem, exosystem, macrosystem. Okay, so those four. So microsystem, individual. Mesosystem is going to be more immediate environment. Exosystem is going to be more of community. And your macro system is going to be more of your society, either at a world or national level, okay? So what I'd like each of your groups to do, I'm going to break you off into maybe 4 or 5, is go through and go through each one of those and answer those. See if you can come up with maybe just a general group answer or just some examples of what a microsystem is that has affected you, or a mesosystem, exosystem, and macrosystem. So try and answer those 4. Are we pretty clear on what we need to do? Okay, great. I'm going to break you off into groups right now. James, you don't have to join the group if it. I have no way to exclude you, unfortunately.
That's fine. I'll join. I'll listen.
Okay, all right.
You just wanted us to discuss specific examples within those systems, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And we'll talk about what you came up with for each one of those here in a little bit. If you didn't get completely through it, that's okay. Kind of running a little over time today.
That's okay.
Give everybody about a couple more seconds to get back to us here. All right. Welcome back, everyone. So what did we come up with? What were some examples you came up with for maybe a microsystem that either through personal experience or some other means that you've observed?
Our group, we said like immediate, like your mom and dad and maybe your siblings that you're living with would be part of your microsystem.
Okay. It could be, yeah, absolutely. So like maybe attachment, right? Attachment to them. Okay, very good.
Could the neighborhood that you that you grew up in be a microsystem as well?
It could have an influence on your microsystem. However, what do you think? What do you think that really falls under, meso or exosystem?
I think that might possibly meso, but I might be wrong.
Yeah, no. It actually would be both of these because depending on the expanse of your neighborhood, if you have a really close-knit neighborhood, especially if you have somebody that lives next door that you spend a lot of time with, that's really kind of like a family, right? So your family and close neighbors.
Yeah, it's kind of how it was with my dad's side of the family. Our neighbors were really close-knit. Like, we'd always be celebrating specifically like holidays with them too, as if they were like a part of our family. So.
Right. Okay. So those two really influenced each other, didn't they? So your immediate values probably bled into the close neighbors, and likewise their values bled into your families, didn't it?
Correct.
Yeah. So that's a good description of interaction between the micro and meso systems. Okay. How about any other examples of meso systems that you came up with?
Oh, okay. I was on mute. I said like the group of our group said like how the close neighbors like neighborhood kids, like the other friends who live real close by.
Okay, so close friends, again, kind of just that really tight family, almost a little bit of an extended family, right? Okay, good. How about exosystem? What did you come up with for exosystems?
With teachers.
Okay, yep, absolutely, teachers.
I said like your friends and like who you choose to associate yourself with.
Okay, maybe later on in life, right? Maybe towards middle school, because if you think about it, when we're in elementary school, we're still very close to our family values, aren't we? We still interact with our family regularly, but when we start venturing out, we start moving a little further outside that sphere and start acquiring values of teachers and lessons of teachers, right? We expand to trust others. And this kind of goes into Eric Erickson's model of trust versus mistrust. The more secure we are here, to a degree, there's a thing that if somebody is a little dependent, that would be secure. But anyway, that could cause problems. We'll talk about that when we get into attachment theories. But the more secure they are here, the more trusting they're going to be when they branch out and accept other people's opinions and values. So teachers, and later on, like adolescent friends, right? Because what happens in high school? Sometimes we get into these groups that we really mesh well with. We adopt their ideas, we adopt their beliefs, but what happens when they challenge our beliefs or our values? What do we do with them?
And we start to distance ourselves.
Right. We'll cancel that person out. We'll not sit with them at lunch or hang out with them or call them anymore. Right. We can do that because they're not really in this closely knit value system that we've adopted. Right. Any other exosystems that you've?
We said like the social media outlets that you associate yourself with.
Okay, social media. Yep. And I would say that also kind of goes into worldly views too, doesn't it? Sometimes, right? Social media kind of influences our worldly views, and when we get into laws and politics, absolutely. All right. So how about macro systems?
I think our group said like the cultural, different values that we hold in each culture.
Yeah. Does anybody have like a cultural example? One that maybe a family tradition or something that, I brought up my Irish heritage and how that really affects most of these areas. Does anybody have a cool cultural example they would care to share?
I actually do the same that you were explaining. Like we left our Christmas tree up because we have so many Irish ornaments. We decorated it all green, had a big St. Patrick's Day party. Always have to go to the parade. I used Irish step dance. It's a very big part of my family's culture.
Okay, so and you can see how that has really bridged the gap with most of these, because that you're raised, and I'm going to say Catholic, Irish Catholic, it's kind of synonymous, right? So a lot of Irish really, I erased it, really have those values embedded at the Meso and exosystems, right? So, all right, very good. All right, did y'all like this exercise? Was this kind of cool?
I dig it.
Thumbs up, thumbs down. All right, not seeing too many thumbs down. You're all too kind. Okay. All right. Any questions on the material we covered? I'll give you some time to ask about assignments and stuff here shortly, but any questions or comments, anything you'd like to share before we close this chapter? One of the questions that came up would be, would being part of the LGBTQ community be a macro system? That very good question. I think that that covers several systems, and it really depends on how you were raised. You know, for some of us, maybe we weren't raised in a household that valued differences like that, and we see that throughout different areas of the world, different areas of even the state, right? Some family values may not accept differences, whether it be race, whether it be ethnicity, cultures, or sexual preferences, or gender, right? So with that, you know, some might say that it's at a macro level because they're getting into the political side of things, or getting into the laws, they're understanding these worldly values. But if you're in a system that accepts that, that could be down to the microsystem, couldn't it? Down to the meso and exosystem. So very good question. Did that answer your question, by the way?
Oh yeah, I was thinking that if like you grew up in a family that was very accepting of that kind of community, then it would be a part of micro or other systems. But I just wanted to make sure.
Absolutely. And if you remember the couple on there, the twins, the older twins that said their parents or their family were bigots, I think is the term that they use, right? But they chose not to be, right? So that was, yeah, what does that tell you? Do you think that that's more environmental, or do you think that's more genetics?
Environmental.
Environmental,
Yeah.
right? Right? And because of what they have maybe learned at a macro, an exosystem or macro system, now they can instill those values at a much lower level and ingrain those more positive values to raise their kids and their grandchildren, right? So that's kind of how all that works. And really cool stuff. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Well, thank you everybody for your participation today. Hopefully you got a lot out of this. In regards to the assignments and stuff, I'll answer some questions here with you, but if you don't have any questions, you can certainly log off. If you want to hang out and see what I have to say about any of these assignments, you're welcome to stay on, okay? If you have anything personal, just keep hanging on. I'll get to that when everybody else drops off, all right? All right. Have a good day, everybody. Have a great weekend. I'll see you back here on Tuesday. I'll still be recording for a little bit until we get to one-on-ones.
I had a quick question.
All right. Who is this?
Kwame.
Oh, hey, Kwame. Oh, your screen didn't light up. Go ahead. What's your question?
So the assignment for the nature versus nurture.
Hold on a second. I got somebody that's playing music. Can you mute your microphone? I'd appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, go ahead.
So the nature versus nurture, I'm having a little bit of trouble understanding what you want us to do. I understand that we have to take a look. I watched the video a couple times, and I was agreeing with what they were saying, how the environment genetic interaction, but I was still having some trouble of understanding what we're supposed to be writing about.
Okay. Well, as it says, consider where you lie in this theory. So try your best to come up. You remember how we said that we've dichotomized nature and nurture, and we really look at those as two separate things. So what this is to have you struggle a little bit to, based on, especially after what we talked about today, to say, yeah, this is for sure genetics, or yeah, this is for sure environmental, because the idea is to get you to say, well, this may be more environmental, but it could be a little bit of genetics too. So does that make sense? Just struggle with it a little bit and try and separate the two of them and see if you can come up with what is genetics and what is environmental traits that you have.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions?
Yeah, how do we do an in-text citation if we're using the book because there's no page number?
Okay. What you'll be doing for your book, for in-text citation, I'm going to share my screen with you quickly here. So your in-text citation is going to be very simple, especially for the book. What you're going to be doing is parenthesis, kale, or Kali, right? Kali, not kale. Is it kale? No, it is kale. I don't know why. Kale, I think it's 2017, I believe. Okay, kale, comma 2017. That's how you do an in-text citation. You do that anytime that you state a fact or an idea that comes from the book. After that, another way you can do that is if you want to include that into the paragraph or sentence itself, according to Kale, Robert Kale, 2017, parentheses, blah, 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 okay? So that's how you can do it either of those two ways. And one thing that a lot of students tend to do, especially in the final paper, is they'll state that this long fact and they'll say according to research or according to the book or something like that. Don't do that. Or if you do that, go ahead and just cite that afterwards. Let me know what book or what research you found that in, okay?
Okay.
Yep.
So would we use that? So if I took the Khan Academy video, like something out of that and referenced it, would like, and I just paraphrase it, I didn't like use word from word, would it be better to do the according to so and then like the year they made that video? Because I was still trying to figure out what year they even published that video.
Yeah, do your best. If there's no date, you would just put n.d, no date.
Okay.
Yeah,
And then another question.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to use another article from other research that I found, and it says the source was Northwestern University, but then they do also have a journal reference. Would it be Northwestern University for the in-text citation, or would I base it off the journal reference that they had on their article page?
I would go with an APA. I'm not going to be too in the weeds on this. If you can verify that source, the best way, this is my trick to doing this, is verifying that source. So if they listed in Northwest University, according to blah, 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 2013, whatever, go back to that source, put eyes on that source, and if that source exists, that's the cleanest, easiest way to do that, is that way you can say that I saw it from that original source. Otherwise, you would have to do, according to Northwest University, as cited in, as cited in whatever that publication was, you would have to do, it gets a little complicated. So again, I'm not looking for perfection here, just do due diligence. Just see that you looked it up and you know where it is.
Okay. So probably the journal reference would probably be the best way to go, because they do reference that journal, a couple of things that they talk about. So it looks like the journal is authentic, like it's not something that's like off of Wikipedia or anything like that.
Okay. Yeah, that's probably the best way to do that, is the cleanest way is just to have eyes on that other journal.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions?
How many sources will we need for the reference page?
At least one. So anything we do in this class, again, you're going to reference either the textbook or some other source, and just at least one. So our bigger project, we're probably going to have like 8 to 10 references, but that's going to be split up between whatever the groups of 5 are. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Any other questions?
I had a question, but it was just like a general psychology question.
Okay, go ahead.
So what happens like biologically in our brains when someone goes like on a psychotic break?
What happens biologically?
Yeah, like does something happen like in the chemicals in our brains, like the transmitters or something? Does like something happen?
Well, we're always balancing neurotransmitters in our brain, and that it could have something to do with serotonin levels. It could have something to do with dopamine levels. It could be one of hundreds of things biologically going on in our brain. Now, psychotic break, that's kind of a general term in somebody that goes from functioning to non-functioning. And what do I mean by that? So some people might consider a clinical case of psychotic break would be not being able to get out of bed for 3 or 4 days or something. That would be a psychotic break. Or maybe even just, I think the non-technical term is losing their crap. All right, so maybe just shouting in a group of people, behavior that doesn't normally exist prior to the introduction of some kind of situation or event that leads them to act irrational or abnormal. But as far as the biology of the brain, it could have something to do with that. It could not. There's no really definitive way. We do know that stress affects our cortisone levels and certain other, our immune system and stuff like that. But is it guaranteed that there's something specific in the brain that shifts during psychotic breaks? Not necessarily.
Okay, yeah, that was my question.
Okay, all right. Are you in my general psych class?
No.
Oh, okay.
I was just wondering if something actually happened.
What's that?
No, I was just wondering if something actually like physically happened, like chemically in the brain or not.
Okay, all right.
So, okay, thanks, bye.
All right, you're welcome. Anybody else have any questions? Anybody need to talk to me one-on-one? Okay, all right. So let me all right, Tala and Michaela, if you would be so kind as to log off. Actually, Michaela, I think I pronounced that incorrectly. All right. All right, I am